Welcome back to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. We've been discussing politics this morning, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with Wisconsin State Representative Mandela Barnes, who represents Wisconsin's 11th Assembly District. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And this has been an intriguing conversation because this show obviously is all about the issues, and this whole scenario with the Milwaukee public school system is constantly an issue. Let's talk about Governor Scott Walker's state budget proposal to cut $127 million in education next year, and that equals about $12 million for MPS. What type of damage would these type of cuts do to the school system?
So we've already seen the damage. When you look 4 years ago with the 2011 state budget, even before I was in the legislature, that did a number on public schools across the entire state. And the continually cut from public education just shows it's a dangerous trend. Right? You can't continue to cut the most vital resource that we have in the entire state. If there's one thing that people could fund in the state of Wisconsin, it would be public education. If you were to survey any number of people across the state, because it's important.
Yeah.
We have to be fully invested in the future of our children if we ever care to move our economy forward in terms of developing our workforce and just total innovation in the state. If we want to be a leader, the first thing you have to do is invest in education. So it sort of sets the course for this entire state to go backwards when we continue to cut from public education.
Yeah, and so tell the people at home how important it is to let their voice be heard, because sometimes people kind of sit back and become an observer of what's going on when it comes to lawmaking and things of that nature. But they truly do have a voice, and it goes beyond voting for individuals. When something is not to their liking, they can email, call. You all are all easy to get in touch with, right?
Right. So, so many people look at government as an abstract, totally, sort of ignoring the fact that you actually are the government. We have to be accessible to you. And unfortunately, when so many people are quiet is when you see so many things like this happen, when you see so many cuts in public education, when you see so much abuse on the environment, when you see, the joblessness rate, when you see, our continuous downward spiral in poverty, as we go down and you see wages of the average income earner are either stagnant or declining, and when it's relative to inflation.
Yeah.
So people have to talk about these things. People have to be involved because, no great change has ever occurred. No great movement has ever taken place without people, one, being upset, and two, making their voices heard. The more you stay quiet, the more people are able to do and get away with. People in elected office can only do what they are allowed to get away with.
All right, well put. And we're going to turn the page and talk about this. I find it interesting. The Milwaukee Common Council recently voted 10-3 to reduce the maximum fine possessing a small amount of marijuana from $500 to $50. And at the time that we're recording this show, Mayor Barrett has 7 working days to sign the legislation. So you've made the headlines with a more limited bill in wanting to decriminalize marijuana up to 25 grams in Wisconsin. Explain your stance on this bill.
So when you look at decriminalization of marijuana, it's a very common sense stance. One, because there are people who agree with legalization, there are people who disagree with legalization. Even the people who disagree with legalization of marijuana would agree that nobody should serve prison time for it. One, it is a drain on our state resources. At a time where we're cutting money from public education, we don't have the time to put someone in jail for $33,000 a year for a simple marijuana possession. Your first possession up to an ounce is a misdemeanor. Second or subsequent amount of possession, regardless of weight, is a felony.
Wow. And
when you look at someone who gets a felony, you are blocked from employment opportunities, you're blocked from educational opportunities. You're sort of, you're blacklisted for the rest of your life because you chose to smoke marijuana, which is no more dangerous than alcohol. And you look at the state of Wisconsin, the number of DUIs that people in this state get, it's very unfortunate. And to criminalize marijuana is very unfortunate, right? And the thing is, we're not promoting marijuana. We're not telling people to go out and just start smoking. What we're saying is that it has been a waste of time and a waste of money to prosecute marijuana offenses, especially when we're talking about simple possession. The city, or excuse me, yeah, New York City decriminalized 25 grams, and you know the jury's still out. When you look at Colorado, or you look at Washington State, and you look at the full legalization there, I guess the jury's still out. People are still waiting to see how that plays out in terms of, you know, economics or in terms of societal impact. So I think we're very far from that, but I think that decriminalization is a logical step, and there are a lot of people who think so. And this isn't a liberal idea. This isn't because a lot of conservatives agree that we're going down the wrong path. You know, we've gotten the war on drugs wrong for years. When you look at the money we spend on corrections at the turn of the 21st century, correction spending in the state of Wisconsin has outpaced university spending.
Wow.
You know, we have to get our priorities together here.
Yeah, enough said. And I will reiterate that this will not legalize the drug, but take away felony charges that are associated with it. That's your goal. But there are some who say that something like this would be a first step in legalizing marijuana in the state of Wisconsin. Do you agree?
I mean, regardless of, you know, whether we get to legalization or not, I mean, those same people, I would ask them, do you think it's right to send someone to prison for this? For a victimless crime, you look at anything else, you look at prescription drug abuse, you look at all the other types of abuse, alcohol abuse, all types of indulgences that people, you know, find themselves in, and the penalty, there is no penalty.
There it is. So there are some statistics that I find very interesting that go along with this whole concept of marijuana and the felony charges. African Americans make up 26% of the city's population, but they account for 86% of those with subsequent violations, and African Americans are arrested 5 times more often than whites for marijuana possession. And there is research that actually shows that blacks and whites actually use marijuana at about the same rate. So how do we get this these disproportionate numbers when dealing with race?
Yeah, there's a huge dichotomy when you look at the racial impact of marijuana prosecutions, and that is one of the biggest reasons that decriminalization at a minimum is the answer, or a step in the right direction. And with the city bringing down the municipal forfeiture to a maximum rate of $50, I mean, because some people, you know, the $500, you know, you don't pay that ticket, you're going to do jail time, even if it is a ticket. And I'm not sure how we got there. I mean, you look at a lot of, you know, unfair sentencing. You look at a lot of, unfortunately, you know, some policing that goes on that is unfair in certain communities, and people are targeted. In our state's prison population, you know, we're half the prison population is African American, and although we make up 6% of the state's population. Yeah. So we have there's a huge, you know, racial bias if you were to look at the data in terms of arrests and in terms of sentencing.
Okay, so you do feel that this will help make a huge difference when looking at those numbers, because we've talked about it on this show how Wisconsin has the highest rate of African American males that are behind bars.
13% African American male incarceration rate. Over half the African American males in Milwaukee County in their 30s have done jail time.
Wow. Now you were elected chairman of the legislature's Black and Latino caucus. Talk more about that and what it entails.
So being the chair of the legislature's Black and Latino caucus, there are only a handful of us. There are 2 African American members of the state Senate in Wisconsin. There are 5 African American members of the Assembly and 2 Latinas. So that's 9 total. In a state like Wisconsin, where you have such disparities as in incarceration, and you have other issues that relate to Latino communities, one of the biggest ones, or you know, one of the ones that struck me the most is, you know, tuition equity. I believe that any student graduating high school in Wisconsin should be able to go to a Wisconsin college and pay in-state tuition. You know, that was taken away 4 years ago. And when you have these sort of injustices and these sort of disparities, there's a need for a Black and or Latino caucus to exist, to bring light to those issues, because half the time, you know, so many of our colleagues don't and won't understand what's going on in our communities. We were elected to represent, you know, our neighborhoods, and in the legislature, you know, so many people don't have experiences in those neighborhoods or communities to know the issues. So in working with our caucus, it is where we are to highlight those issues and bring them to the attention of our colleagues who may not understand it.
All right. And gun violence, needless to say, is a major concern in cities across America, including right here in Milwaukee. You were quoted in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel saying that no matter how much Milwaukee achieves, the violence is a black cloud hanging over the city. There was a symposium held at the III Shrine Center in Milwaukee several weeks ago, and the goal was to discuss evidence-based approaches to gun violence. Give us your thoughts on gun violence and how we can get a hold of what we're seeing take place.
So I'll say even like education, with poverty being the root cause of our educational, of the state of education in the city of Milwaukee. Poverty is the biggest factor in gun violence or violence in general in the city of Milwaukee. But unfortunately, too many people have access to firearms. And it shouldn't be that way. It is easier for some people to find a gun than it is to find a job in the city of Milwaukee. And until we get serious about changing that, and that can only be changed at the state legislature, because municipalities are not able to enact their own firearm ordinances. So the state of Wisconsin has to act. When there is gun violence in the city of Milwaukee, that is gun violence that is taking place in the state of Wisconsin. And with the state having the authority to act on it, leadership, whether it's the governor, whether it's the speaker, whether it's the Senate Majority Leader, they have a duty to act on gun violence that is taking place in the state of Wisconsin. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that happen. We've seen too many children shot. We've seen too many people struck by stray bullets. We've seen too many communities torn apart. This is something that has to change. And again, Milwaukee, we're at that point where we can become one of the greatest cities in this entire nation. Once again, we were there. We can do that again. But if we don't get right, if we don't get serious about addressing the issue of poverty and the issue of violence, then we're going to be stuck. We're going to be stuck at a standstill for a long time. We're going to become something that I'm quite frankly very afraid of us becoming. And so that is why my colleagues are working very hard to push leaders in the state legislature to move and act immediately on addressing this issue. When you look at universal background checks, which that's a no-brainer. Anybody who buys a gun anywhere in the state of Wisconsin should have to submit to a background check. The legislature, there are leaders in the legislature that want to repeal the 48-hour waiting period to purchase a handgun. What is with how immediately does a person need to use a handgun? If a person needs to buy it and they need it within 48 hours, chances are they want to use it right away.
Right.
And that is a scary thought, especially when you live in the city and especially when you deal with the issues that we're dealing with.
Wow. So I thank you so much for coming on and talking about all of these issues, because they are very important to the viewers, your constituents, everyone who's living in the state of Wisconsin and across our country. So I appreciate your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Wisconsin State Representative Mandela Barnes. He's representing Wisconsin's 11th Assembly District. And for more information on anything that we've discussed, you can log on to legis.wisconsin.gov or call 608-266-3756. That is going to do it for today's show. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. As always, I thank you for watching, and I do hope you join us again next week as we take another look at our issues in Milwaukee. Have a great day.